So yesterday, I mentioned a story coming out of Venezuela about two invasion attempts into the country. The one over the weekend involved speedboats full of mercenaries coming out of Colombia. Now, news broke last night with an address from President Maduro of Venezuela that there were two American mercenaries that had been captured in foiling of that coup attempt. Jordan Gudrea, CEO of Silver Corp, told Washington Post that Americans were being held there were acting in a larger operation involving 6 Venezuelans called Operation Gideon. The other members of the group were captured or killed on Sunday. We're joined by Kevin Zeese, co-director of Popular Resistance and one of the founders of the Venezuelan Assembly Protection Defense Collective. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, Kevin, this story is rather astonishing. Both of these guys were Green Berets and Special Forces So who was most likely behind this? I mean, is there any U.S. involvement in this particular activity?
There's no way this would happen without U.S. involvement. There were Special Forces people, as you mentioned, captured. There was an active DEA agent that was also captured. The training was going on in Colombia, the closest ally of the United States. The corporation involved is based in the United States and is led by a former Green Beret. They've bragged about having relationships with White House security and mentioned Keith Skiller, Trump's personal security guard. They have clear ties to the United States, and this is part of a long-time regime change operation. In fact, there's video of a contract from Silver Corps of Juan Guaido signing to pay for these attacks. There were 2 attacks in the last few days that were both stopped by the United States. 2 attempted incursions into the country with seriously armed weapons, caches of weapons on the ground in Venezuela. And so Venezuela's thwarted them twice. Now, of course, the U.S. doesn't give up. But we expect the U.S. will keep trying, as the U.S. has been trying to remove the government since Hugo Chavez was elected in 1999, and since President Maduro took power after he died. And it was, of course, Juan Guaido, the U.S. puppet, pretending to be a president and being given hundreds of millions of dollars by the U.S. of money seized from Venezuela to pay for these kinds of activities. So, yes, the U.S. is heavily involved. This will not happen without the United States.
So, from this politics and geopolitics standpoint, I look at the world kind of as a game board because I don't necessarily think the people in power regard human beings when they're looking at what they want to do in geopolitical or economic interests, meaning when they're pushing and expanding their interests into other countries. How does Maduro withstand the pressure that's been put on him going back all the way to the Obama administration? I mean, Obama called Venezuela a natural threat or something, a threat to the United States. How does he maintain power despite all of that pressure that's being applied to him by international forces?
When I visited Venezuela twice in the last few years, my sense of the situation was U.S. attacks were uniting people around Maduro. He is getting more popular as he successfully stops kinds of attacks, as he successfully builds 3 million, more than 3 million social housing units that are given to the poorest Venezuelan families. Million housing units with 4 people in each house, 12 million people getting housing, population of 32 million. Provides a CLAP program, which is a food program, and a program of basic supplies for kitchens. Each month, 6 million families get those. 24 million Venezuelans getting the CLAP program. Again, about a population of 32 million. So the people see he is providing essential services even when under economic attack in the United States. So people are uniting around him. On the other hand, Juan Guaido has more friends in Colombia and in Florida and Washington, D.C. Has very little support in Venezuela. He's a joke in Venezuela. He's not taken seriously. He's calling for more sanctions against the people of Venezuela, calling for military attacks and now funding military attacks against Venezuela. So he has no political support. The opposition can't win elections because they put forward proposals that will hurt most Venezuelans. They represent only the wealthiest Venezuelans. Can't win elections. Venezuela being a deep democracy, and it is a deep democracy. It is not a dictatorship. was there for the election of President Maduro, and saw a very well-run democratic system. So we get a lot of misinformation here. It's not surprising Maduro is popular because he is screwing the people of Venezuela. The United States is trying to undermine them, and their puppet Guaido, as a U.S.
Kevin, just clarify for me here. I still don't quite understand what was trying to be done with this attack here on Venezuela. So they were going to get some 9 people to overthrow an entire country. I guess I just don't get the strategy that they were trying to roll out.
Well, what they were doing was sending. It was actually 30 people in two attempts over the weekend, but they're sending people in order to create a terrorist cell that will conduct terrorist activities to create chaos in Venezuela on top of the economic war the U.S. is fighting, and to commit assassinations against Venezuelan officials and social leaders. This has been exposed multiple times in documents that Venezuela has seized, and so this is something not reported in the United States, but it's common knowledge in Venezuela. This is the strategy. So these people were there to spark conflict, just as the U.S. has done in other countries, using people from extremist Muslim groups in various Middle Eastern countries to do the same thing. And it's important that you mentioned geopolitical politics in an earlier Venezuela is critical on that front because it is the number one, not only in oil, people know that, it's number one in gold, number one in silver reserves, number 5 in gas, and has vast quantities of minerals that are essential for electronics and for weapons, as well as vast quantities of clean water, which is becoming an essential resource in our polluted world. So Venezuela has lots of resources that the U.S. and Western countries want to continue to fund their capitalist societies and their war machines. On top of that, Venezuela has stood up to the United States for more than 20 years now. The U.S. has been trying to take back Venezuela. It had controlled Venezuela for most of last century, had taken the oil profits for U.S. oil companies and kept the people of Venezuela starved. They took back power in 1999, and the U.S. has been trying to take power back since then. Venezuela has succeeded in saying no. That is something the U.S. cannot allow. If countries start saying no to the United States, ending our regime change, economic warfare, military threats, that is a major defeat for the United States. So from geopolitical sense, it's big. On top of that, Russia and China are allied with Venezuela. So an attack on Venezuela can become an attack on Russia and China, while Colombia and Brazil are allied with Venezuela, with the United States. So we have a regional war and a big potential geopolitical battleground. So this is a very important conflict, and Venezuela stopping the U.S. is very significant for all of Latin America and for the world.
It's also one of those items, like you said, for the geopolitical space of this. It goes beyond just the resources. It goes to this notion of control, meaning whoever is in the White House, black, white, gay, straight, or whatever, is endowed with this almost exceptional quality where they look at the world as their dominion of sorts. And they pick up on the policies of the previous administration, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. So this notion that Democrats and Republicans are somehow different in foreign policy, not so much. They just piggyback off of the last one. So Trump piggybacks off Obama's policies going against Venezuela. I guess my point is, this is not just economic, correct? This is also somewhat of an ideological thing where these guys try to take control of these various countries and the leaders of these countries, be it Ecuador, be it Honduras, or for that matter, be it Bolivia.
That's right. This is really part of the fall of U.S. empire, the end of dollar hegemony, and as this corona crisis escalates, as the economic collapse escalates, Donald Trump is going to need to change the topic. He's trying to blame China, which has no basis in fact, and he's trying to change the topic to these military conflicts with Iran and with Venezuela. But the reality is this is part of a long-term downward spiral of U.S. empire. The first sanctions actually began with George Bush. President Obama escalated them by declaring Venezuela a national security threat, and Trump has built on top of that by declaring Guaido the president. So this is a long-term foreign policy of the United States, really going back before Chavez when the U.S. controlled Venezuela, but since Chavez trying to remove him from power. And the U.S. being unable to do so strengthens the views of people around the world who are under the domination of the United States, especially in Latin America. If Venezuela continues to defeat the United States, this is a sign to the rest of the world that the U.S. is not invincible. The U.S. can be defeated. People can have their independence. People can be in sovereign nations. They can create a government that supports the needs of the people and not the needs of the wealthy. That's what this is a big, really, Venezuela is a big part of this bigger issue of U.S. empire and the dominance of neoliberal capitalism.
Yeah, Kevin, talk a little bit more about the DC consensus around U.S. imperialism. You're somebody that fought on the front lines against U.S. imperialism, and as we mentioned, you're one of the founders of the Venezuelan Embassy Protection Defense Collective. Talk to us a little bit about the depths of the organization that goes into protecting U.S. imperialism. I mean, it's the media, it's the think tanks, it's the wealthy folks that are in exile who have millions of dollars in banks and run corporations. Who are all the forces that are working to uphold the current doctrine towards Latin America here in the United States?
And it's not just Latin America, it's also the Middle East and in Africa. This is a broad consensus in Washington, D.C. We have two political parties who are both funded by Wall Street, both funded by the military-industrial complex, the energy industry, and others who profit from this kind of long-term U.S. economic dominance, which you could call imperialism. So people are profiting from this. The vast military-industrial complex, $1 billion in Pentagon spending is justified by this. The vast oil wealth is justified by this. And even with Bolivia, you're talking about resources that, and in Venezuela, you're talking about resources that are essential for the future of energy, electronics, for electric cars, for weapons, as well as for the new space, outer space force that Trump is pushing, as Ronald Reagan pushed way back in the 1980s. These are long-term U.S. policies. U.S. has been a secret empire from the people of the United States. On the world, everyone knows the U.S. is an empire. We have 800 military bases and many more outposts, probably 12 to 1,300 outposts and military bases around the world. Our paramilitary forces are in more than 80 countries. The world sees the U.S. as an empire, but in the United States, it's a secret empire. It's only been in recent years people start to talk about U.S. empire, and that's because U.S. empire is failing. Seen this with other empires. For example, France was a long-time empire to its people. When it started to fail, people started to talk about it. What's going on with this foreign policy? On the United States, the empire economy has been hurting the people of the United States for years because we have to seize the transnational corporations, which means that jobs were sent overseas where they could get cheap, virtually slave labor, where they could get cheap resources. And so that has has hollowed out the U.S. economy. So people in the United States are hurt by the empire economy. So
I think you're completely on the right point, Kevin. I got to cut you off there. We are out of time, but this idea that our actions abroad impact us here at home. So if you ever hear anybody talking about the big sweeping domestic changes they want to make without talking about what they'll do with U.S. foreign policy, ask them a few more questions about how serious they are about implementing change here at home. That was Kevin Zeese, the co-director of Popular Resistance and one of the founders of the Venezuelan Embassy Protection Defense Collective. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be on. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Great. Yep, thank you. With that, we'll take a break before we come back.